Blackleg Sanji versus Marco the Phoenix. Who wins? Now, to really get an understanding of how this matchup is going to go, we have to see what Marco is first capable of in Wano. He's able to fight King and Queen and even make King cough out blood, however he was eventually overwhelmed, plus King and Queen would go on to get amps when fighting Sanji and Zoro. I'd say Marco, King, and Queen in all honesty should just be in a similar tier of power as one another, with maybe King at his best potentially being stronger since he can push Zoro to get his KOH amp, plus Zoro defeated him after getting bullied so much that he learned how King fought. Zoro is weakened here to be fair, but he is for the most part of Wano anyway. Then Queen in all honesty shouldn't be really that far behind if you want to just say for the benefit of the doubt that Marco is above Queen. Even though all those hits that he lands on base Queen is able to tank, by the way. And I do think there is a slight gap in power between King and Queen, so if you want to say that Marco is in between that gap, then go ahead. However, Queen would show off his amp in his fight against Sanji, and this is where we learn that Sanji himself is built different. Despite losing his raid suit, he gains an amp that's for sure way more powerful than the raid suit, and even goes as far as to perception blitz Queen at full power. This would mean in terms of speed, he'd easily blitz around Marco since he's relative to base King and Queen overall, and if you want to say he's stronger, they're still relative regardless. Meanwhile, Sanji would still completely bully him in the speed department. And as we know, Sanji would go on to get the blue flames that just completely neg Queen, and Marco's regen would last a while since he can withstand both King and Queen's attacks. But Queen, while amped, didn't really do too much lasting damage onto Sanji, and the Queen that was pressing Marco and that was taking a bunch of hits from Marco literally couldn't do a thing to Sanji. He did get smacked a couple of times, but he was already fatigued initially, and this just speaks more for Sanji because he's blitzing Queen while not at 100%. Sanji one-shotting Queen at his best with this should allow Sanji to eventually overwhelm Marco. Keep in mind, Queen at his best could not perceive or really do anything to Sanji, meanwhile base Queen is even taking full-on frontal assaults from Marco. And although he isn't reacting, he's still able to perceive him. And Marco drawing blood from King isn't really all that impressive when you see Sanji and Zoro do the very same thing when they go on to save him. And then they proceed to show off way crazier feats when they actually fight them. Sanji is at the very least capable of taking any attack Marco throws at him, plus has the speed to perception blitz him, and should have the attack potency to harm him. And I know Marco seems like a god because, oh my god, he fought an admiral. But he didn't really harm him, plus Marco and Wano is legit just the same Marco but has better healing. So using Marineford feats to try and contradict the Wano stuff doesn't really work there. And so Sanji would drop kick Marco, literally, by the end of Wano.